Hello, everyone. My name is Sarrah Christensen. I thank you for attending this EA Zoom meeting today on navigating your T-squares and grand crosses. Just to have a little background, I'm a student of Stephen Forrest and also Jeffrey Wolf Green's material and also their wisdom that they've shared. You can find me at my website at onesagesview.com or follow me on the Facebook page that I manage and or Instagram at onesagesview. Today my volunteers are Phoebe and Sarah, so thank you very much for bringing your real life examples to explore this topic today. So to begin with, to understand what we're looking at, we're going to be looking at the natal chart with transits today for each of the volunteers. And what we're going to focus on is the houses, signs, planets, and aspects. Essentially, we're looking at what houses is the grand cross or T-square occupying for these individuals, and then we'll consider the life themes that would be activated by transits and also progressions. You can always carry this information over to progressions. Are the rulers of the signs of those houses involved in the grand cross or the T-square? And what kind of aspects do the rulers receive that are part of the grand cross or the T-square? Are the rulers angular, succedent, or cadent? And what focal planet or planets seems to show the most power or influence of the configuration of either the grand cross or the T-square? The focal planet mainly I would probably look at for the T-square. Does the grand cross or T-square land in intercepted signs of the person's chart? And what is the modality of the grand cross? Cardinal, fixed, or mutable? These are some of the questions you'd want to first ask yourself before you dive in, because these are going to be kind of how you break it down. Okay? Just want to share some resources that I used for exploring this theme that I think are great. If there's others, you can comment on the video later that you like to use for exploring these tasks that we do in astrology for looking at T-squares and grand crosses. But I love Tracy Mark's book, Planetary Aspects for Managing Your T-square. It's a great book. And I also use these two resources for looking at intercepted signs for our example with Phoebe. It discusses with Joanne's book and Reverend Alice Miller's book. They kind of approach it differently. In Reverend Alice Miller's book, she shares the depths on the intercepted planets and then the effects for the planetary symbolism and the houses, sign, planet rules. We'll see that in Phoebe's example. Joanne Wickenberg's Your Hidden Powers book has the intercepted signs, but also retrograde planets, so half the book is on intercepted signs, and it focuses on, you know, the sign within a house and the signs that pull double duty, as you'll see in the example. And she covers the elements, environments versus destiny, and kind of what the natural symbolism of planets, aspects, and phases between the planets. So these are great resources to consider for deeper exploration. Okay, so we're going to start off with Phoebe. And we have 9 slides per volunteer, so we're going to have to move very quickly, make it within an hour. So what I'm going to do is set you up in understanding what we're looking at from the natal chart first, and then we're going to dive into the examples where transits activated the configuration of the grand cross in Phoebe's chart and the T-square in Sarah's chart later. So here is Phoebe's natal chart. And we can see she's a rising sign Cancer, so her moon is very important. And we can see this lovely stellium of Leo with her sun, Mercury, and the moon, and even Venus, but it's Venus is earlier on in Leo. And then we have part of the grand square. If you can tell here that Jupiter is in the 10th house in Pisces, and Virgo opposite has Mars opposite that. And all of that, that opposition between Jupiter in Pisces and Virgo and Virgo Mars is square the nodal axis, so that creates a mutable grand cross. Her south node is in the 12th house in Gemini and the north node in Sagittarius. And within 10 degrees of the north node, we have Neptune, which is significant to the Jupiter and Pisces in the 10th. Also important, I think, to consider here is how many signs are on, we have kind of a double situation here of intercepted houses. We have Capricorn, Cancer and Capricorn on the 1st and the 7th. So we have Cancer on the 1st and the 2nd house cusp. That on the other side is Capricorn on the 7th and 8th house cusp. And then we have Leo playing double duty on 3rd house and 4th house cusp. And on the opposite, that's in 9th house and 10th house cusp with Aquarius. So the intercepted signs are interesting because they're part of this grand cross. So it's kind of an unusual situation with so many things kind of being intercepted. So approaching Phoebe's chart was a big challenge for me to understand it. The Pisces is intercepted in the 10th and Virgo is intercepted in the 4th. So, and the Neptune is with the north node in the 6th house in Sagittarius, and that is intercepted. Sagittarius is intercepted in the 6th. And that means Gemini is intercepted in the 12th. So this is a very complex scenario in trying to unravel this interception symbolism in her chart. And the best way to do that is to look at the history of the individual to see how it is behaving through the archetypes in her experiences and what she's registering and integrating at certain points in her life along the development of cycles. So I also want to make note of Mercury because it is the south node ruler and it's so close to the sun and in between the moon. So there's such a solar fire presence in Phoebe's experiences, and you'll hear this. And then as she matures in her life and goes through experiences, you'll see how Jupiter and the Neptune start kind of coming online more and more as she gets closer to the age she is now. Okay, here we go. Okay. So the first part, I want to give a little bit of background, and then I'll invite you in to jump in, Phoebe, so bear with me here for a second. So background on Phoebe. She let's see here. She was born into a family, kind of the hippie vibe, good vibration, set of parents, kind of an environment with the environment of hashish and free love. So she had an upbringing early on of this just very free, just like kind of a free wild child, as I called it, and just kind of like the little flower to her parents. And so, let's see here. I'm going to jump right into the first example since we have such tight timeline, okay? So let's go to, I'm going to go to February 12th of 2007, and we see that transiting Uranus in Pisces is activating the opposition to her Mars in Virgo. It's also conjunct her Jupiter, and then we also have it's the transiting Jupiter also on her north node in Sag, and a transiting Saturn on her sun right here. And the sun is in Aquarius, also opposing her own sun. And so that's kind of a lot going on with this particular transit. And then transiting Mars is in Capricorn, and that is separating from separating from her natal Saturn. by 5 degrees or so. So here, I wanted to kind of see how the how this particular time point is influencing what's going on in her life. We're going to see kind of how this intercepted sign behaves from what she's doing in life, and also kind of what the tensions might be. And so, Phoebe, can you share what was going on for you in February of 2007? And then we'll kind of go to the next chart for the part 2 of that same.
Okay.
Okay.
So I just returned from India from a like 2.5 month trip.
Mm-hmm.
I returned with an ex-partner. I took a partner with me that I used to be with, and we were friends. And we ended up returning together on the same flight. He'd run out of money, because I kind of helped him to get home. And then there was another partner kind of on the periphery. I didn't realize he was going to be my partner, and I didn't actually really like him. But he was showing up, and he's the partner that I ended up with, that we're going to talk about later.
Okay. So at this moment, we can see the international travel is coming online. So that Jupiter and I would say even Pisces, we can see that international, or that long distance travel is part of the equation, because we have kind of dual symbolism here. Was it kind of a short decision, or a quick decision to decide to go to India? Because I'm wondering about the Uranus in the Pisces.
Well, I did, normally my decisions are like that, but this one, I think it was a month. I mean, if that's short, then yeah, I mean, that's long for me, but.
Yeah, that's actually very quick for an international travel decision for some people, but not for you. So,
Yeah.
So we're beginning to see, now you brought along a friend, as a part of that trip. You mentioned you had to forego something during this trip because you had brought a friend along. And what was that you couldn't do?
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I was going on my own, and then all of a sudden, people like were kind of coming out of the ether going, "Save me, I need to come with you," like, and so, what was going to be, like a kind of an inner journey, all of a sudden I was taking, everybody with me, because there was an opportunity to work out there, and it meant we got free flights and stuff. So I helped people onto this trip.
Okay.
And, yeah.
Excellent. So as I look at the symbolism, we're starting to get a sense that things happen very quickly in your world, and especially for some kind of significant opportunities, but also kind of where you go in life. It just kind of, it's online, boom, there it is, and then you're off and running. So that I got a sense of that for this chart. So you can keep that in mind. I think the Saturn in the Leo on the Sun and opposite the Aquarius kind of makes me think about some of the pilgrimage and people being attracted to you, kind of from that perspective as well. So as we can see, the nodes are part of this equation. So this trip, kind of works into her nodal structure as a square to that. So it's not a nodal opposition per se, but it's kind of square the nodes kind of timing, as you can see. Okay, next slide. March 16th, 2007. We're just a month later. You're still home from India. But now the transiting Uranus is conjunct the natal, the transiting Uranus conjunct natal Jupiter in Pisces, and activating it again. But now we have Venus opposed to natal Uranus. So here's natal Uranus on the 24, and Venus here 28. But it's also bringing in Chiron. I wanted to bring this one in, even though it's not in the equation. It's kind of the continuation of the theme, a little bit of the Uranus hitting that Grand Cross. And the transiting nodes square natal nodes, of course, and conjunct Jupiter-Mars opposition. That's still kind of visible here. And the plus outside the is a stellium in Aquarius. Let's look at all this Aquarius energy. I'm just gonna go run with this, Phoebe. On this one, it's really short. Is she kind of mentioned that she was on the fringe of a new tribe of people for herself and sparking a new chapter. Parties in the woods, she mentioned. So kind of like there's new and exciting things, a new energy, a new vibe of people and friends that she's connecting with. And I think that shows up in this chart, which I think is important for parts of her understanding this Grand Cross in her chart.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So moving on to September of 2008, a year later, we have a transiting Saturn. It conjuncts the Mars down here in her 4th house, and that's in Virgo. And it opposes Jupiter, so we're bringing in that energy again towards multiple planets in the Grand Cross, Jupiter and Pisces, natally. And then both are square the nodes, of course, through the 6th and the 12th. And around this time, let's see here, transiting Uranus is in Pisces and is separated. It's pretty much separating. It's let's see here, 5 away, 5.5 away, 5.5 degrees about, or 5 degrees. And then transiting Neptune is opposite the Sun in Leo. If we find right here is at 22 and the Sun is at 24. So that's still applying. Of course, it's going to apply for a little while there. So we can see how these friendships and so forth are kind of impacting her identity, her Leo Sun identity. And then transiting Jupiter over here in Capricorn, squaring from her 7th house, that Libra stellium in the transit, all of this down here. Can you help me understand what was going on for you in that time period?
Well, it was quite a heavy period actually, really, because I had a kind of savior complex, wanting to save somebody, like that had a heroin addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So for 18 months, I was with this guy, hoping to help him get off heroin, and I never ever took any. And then I got to a point when he tried to recover using an entheogen called ibogaine, iboga root, which purges the system, and after 4 days you're clean. But he went to get another hit again, so it hadn't helped, his beliefs. And so I went on a protest and started taking it myself, and just to freak his head out. And and I was kind of able to sustain periods of time and stop and not have a problem with it. But of course, that just enabled him. But that's what was going on in that period of time.
Mm-hmm. So I wanted, that's an interesting thing, because now Saturn is like bringing some intensification to the 4th and conjunct that Virgo. And I always, when a planet's in transit, I always relate back to the natal position of that planet. And in this case, I see Saturn in the 1st in Cancer. And so there's kind of that, a desire to take care and then be the one who is responsible for that care. And sometimes we, as you learned in this case for yourself, it can be a lot, and sometimes you can't change how their behavior is. And it's interesting because you have the Libra stellium over the going through the 5th. I think this language is around the balance or imbalance going on in the relationship paradigm. And from a kind of a love affair kind of involved in the mix, right? So also on this one was the, nope, I think I covered it all. Oh, the Mercury was important. Where's Mercury here? Yeah, he's right on this as well, right there. Okay, Continue on to the next one. Only like about a month later, in October 18, 2008, the transiting Saturn squares her nodal axis. So it's just moved a few degrees off the Mars, but now it's truly squaring the nodes a bit more. And also the Sun is now in Libra and on her natal Uranus, and opposite her Chiron in Aries. And the Moon is transiting through the 12th house in Gemini and comes to her south node. And I kind of wonder if this is the time frame when you kind of gave up and participated in the substance with the boyfriend or the partner, and if that was kind of the giving up point, and kind of because the Moon being in next to the south node made me wonder about that. And then, of course, the squares to your natal Jupiter and Mars. And it pulls in kind of the Venus at the 29th, at this moment, that the Saturn is squaring the nodes, and Venus at that same moment is at the 29th degree of Scorpio. So kind of is in the symbolism as well. So, all right, moving forward. So this is July 19th, 2016. And in this detail was a full moon moment. Is that this one? Yeah, I think so. Yep. This is the full moon moment where you begin a new relationship. Can you give us a little bit of information around this new relationship?
Yeah, so I was trying to finish with my partner Matt, which was a very karmic, big love job relationship. And somebody else, you know, there were so many things, complexes with our relationship, and somebody came along and seemingly looked after all my needs and gave me the validation I was looking for. And he was a Royal Marine, and I had a camper van, so we just went off traveling together. And for 9 months we were together, and then I found out that he was homeless all along, and it ended violently.
Yeah. So the next chart will be showing the end of the relationship. But I want before we flip to that chart, I want to point out this is a relationship that is significant for Phoebe, because there's multiple things going on. First, the North Node is conjunct Mars in Virgo in the 4th house, and Jupiter is very close, so it's kind of adding to that detail. So kind of home, and yet you're kind of traveling in your camper van. It's a little bit more humble and in how you're living. But on the other side, we have the South Node in Pisces in the 10th. So close to that Jupiter. And then looking over in the 6th house, we see the transiting Saturn is in between the Neptune in Sag and the North Node in Sag. And I think that's significant because you didn't know his situation of his homeless situation for many months. And so at the beginning, at this moment of their meeting, there's lots of illusion that's been, painted for you to kind of step into. And at the same time, there's an interesting thing with Pluto in Capricorn. This relationship moment, like when you meet this person, Pluto's in the 7th house, in your 7th house. And the midheaven of the moment that you meet is so close. And so there's kind of like this person has a transformational effect, and it's visible to the public at some point during the relationship. It really becomes that. But also look at the transiting Uranus right on that Chiron in the 11th house, and then opposite. So this is kind of like your Uranus opposition moment. This is like a transformational moment.
Yeah, it did very much seem like that. Like it had like kind of angelic realms to it, the relationship did.
Yeah. So here's the end moment of the relationship. And we can see some challenges in this chart. Everyone is on their journey back to source. So where they're at in the evolutionary curve, they bring us things, they remind us of things. So looking at it from a non-judgment point of view, but there are definitely some challenges here. If you look at the nodes, the transiting node plus the moon and the midheaven of the chart of the end of the relationship is all in Virgo, right on the Mars. So this, we also have opposite, we have the Neptune applying to the Jupiter and the Neptune applying to the Mars. So that it's applying, and it's not released yet. It hasn't made its exact yet, but it's applying. Let's see here. So that influences kind of the perception, but what I found interesting was that Venus, the relationship kind of, what we look for in relationship and rapport, has moved into Aries in the 11th, and Mars has moved into Taurus. So Mars and Venus are in mutual reception, and yet it did not go well. Venus has passed an opposition to Pluto, so that was, and Venus moves pretty quickly. You can see Pluto here at the bottom of her chart. So she had just passed it to this point. And the way it ended, I see Mars is playing a role near the throat chakra, which you did tell me about. And, you can see that the challenges with that. But what's interesting is this one right here, the Mercury in Pisces and the Chiron in Pisces at 24 degrees are together in the 10th house. So it's kind of the break of the illusion that you've been in, and but it's also kind of tapping into the because Mercury rules the South Node, it ties into that, and Mercury also rules the Mars, a key planet in the Grand Cross, and that could be the anger that hasn't been resolved. Yes. So I thought that was an interesting chart.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. This is July 21st. Did I just do this one?
No, not yet.
No. Okay. This is a very, very important moment. I think this is one of the key moments of recent for Phoebe. So why don't you go ahead and share if you like. If you want me to go, if you want me to do the share, and you let me know. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So this was a Sunday. I'd actually had a premonition that my mum was going to have a heart attack a week before this, Sarah. And I was crying on the Thursday, and I still went to this festival, which was a conscious festival, no drugs and alcohol, so it was very high vibration, clear, grounded. And I took a card, and somebody said, "Oh, nobody knows when we will die. Maybe it'll be tonight." And it's really weird. I didn't really know what it meant, even though I'd been having these premonitions. And when I left the festival, I found out that my mum had had a serious heart attack. I mean, she breathed for 15 hours through this heart attack. She nearly killed herself. So I came back home, and that was a huge turning point for me in my life, where I really did have my feet on the ground, and my head was like, flying as well. But it was a very transformational time. I really kind of felt the universe kind of supporting me. It really came to me, especially around the eclipse. Yeah.
Yeah. Of 17 or an eclipse in 18?
The 27th, the blood moon, the lunar.
Okay.
27th of July, yeah. So, because my mum got pneumonia as well, it was a really tough week. And so I had to tell her to breathe, and that it was the planetary motions that were going on. I was telling her while she was in hospital, you need to breathe through this. And so, it was a heavy week.
Right. So let's look at the chart and kind of break it down. You kind of like mentioned that you felt supported by the universe, which is interesting because the Neptune is now at the kind of the exact square of the nodes at this moment. So that's kind of interesting, touching just past Jupiter, but I think that it's more exact on the nodes and applying to that. And then Venus is opposite and applying, but conjunct Mars and applying within 1 degree of Mars, but then just a few degrees off the opposition to Jupiter. And so there could be kind of a focus around the health, the care with the Venus there, and in one of the parental houses. But we also have, at that same moment, Saturn is significant because it's sitting opposite your ascendant just by 3 degrees, but it's still sitting there in the descendant line in Capricorn. And that's really showing how you are showing up in a this responsible way, but also kind of your intuition is coming in big waves for you at this moment. So there's kind of a combination going on. And also the Mars transiting in Aquarius is conjunct the South Node in Mars between the 8th and the 9th house cusp. So Mars is in the 5th, and that is, opposite your Venus. So the Venus is very important in this chart, which is interesting because of the relationship, but also how you show up for love and what you value, because the Venus sits in your 2nd house of values. So we can see how the engagement of your nodal axis is coming online, and intuition and how to be in energy with your mother is very important in this chart. You can also see kind of the suddenness of the events because the South Node with Mars in Aquarius is squaring the Uranus in Taurus from the 11th. And so this is significant in kind of that energy of the fixed signs. So what was before is suddenly changing. So I think also looking at the ascendant of the moment of the chart, I put this as a noon, so that changes, but when it landed for the noon position on that day, the ascendant was sitting right on the Pluto in the 4th house. But there's also the Jupiter and Moon in Scorpio, and Jupiter is a part of that Grand Cross, and so it's coming from emotional, raw, intensive place around care. Even though it's in the 5th house, I would look at, because Jupiter is significant in the 10th house of the Grand Cross, and it's kind of taking you on a deep dive, and you're kind of turning on the intuition and how to help your mother breathe through it and be with her for that, but also just the raw emotion. I mean, this is your mom, So let's go on to the next one. This was shortly after, just a couple months later. This is a really big shift for you, Phoebe. What happened here?
So this is the date that so my mum's home from hospital just 3 days, and I want to go headlong into yoga on a daily basis. So I chose a school to do with Kundalini yoga that I'd been introduced to about 11 months before.
So you're just now getting the chance to do it?
Pardon?
You just now, because your mom's home from hospital, and now you can actually do it?
Yeah, because I was traveling and doing everything. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So as we see here, I thought what was interesting about this is the Virgo, which is kind of at the bottom of her chart, and I kind of look at that as this intensification of focus on your own well-being, your own health, and I look at that from the healing aspect that the Kundalini Yoga is bringing to your body and your mind, as well. But look at the nodes. The transiting nodes are right on your Venus, so it's kind of like this North Node is right on your Venus, the 2nd house, and so that's kind of showing up as this very valuable thing for you as you engage with it. And Neptune, right at the top of the chart, conjunct the Jupiter. So really engaging your chart again and in a very direct way on the Grand Cross. And I think that's kind of a spiritual expression and opening up, and that's very public. People can see this transformation going on for you. So that's very significant in this chart as well.
Do you know what also opposite my Venus is my Venus star point at 3 degrees Aquarius? So it's actually on the nodal axis.
Of the transiting, yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's really cool what you just told me.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
I'm working with that now. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think this is a moment where it begins to pick up speed in your evolutionary kind of understanding of what your purpose is. Yeah.
Totally.
So then we have this year, January 7th, 2019, was a significant moment for your mom again. You want to share that little detail?
Yeah, so this was the day of my mum's operation for her heart valve. We spent the previous 6 months building her heart muscle up so that she could sustain the operation. And there was a little complication. She lost a lot of blood, but they kind of just got on with it. And she came out with a new heart valve, and she had a little minor stroke. And this was another period, another time where I have to up my game and not be phased because my mum, you know, obviously was. Like, bless her. So yeah, so this was where I was doing a lot of balancing using the modality called Psych K, where I'm helping her to make the new neural pathways so that she can helping her to join the dots, really.
So your own modalities that you brought to yourself helped you help your mom, and then in turn this is kind of growing from there. It's blooming from there. Look at all the Capricorn in transit during this moment, and it kind of turns on a lot your first house because it's opposite your Cancer. And the moon, interesting, is in Aquarius in the moment, very near that Venus star point that you were talking about, and opposite your Venus. And so your ability to be objective in your emotions in this moment is helping you, I think, and also what you bring in the new modalities to the reality that you're managing. And so you can kind of see this Grand Cross is, you can see how Phoebe has stepped through kind of these different points in her life and is really turning on in a big way how her Grand Cross has been turning on. Even though it's been intercepted, it's kind of like it did in the early years. It didn't have the right environment that she was aware of how it, so when she went away and traveled, it started turning on in those moments. And when she got introduced to a new tribe, she had to have some experience before she could understand how this thing was working for her, or with her, better word. So we also see in this moment when your mom's having the operation, and the sun is opposite the Saturn, so it's kind of that responsible piece of your maturity coming out. There's a lot of maturity coming out. Saturn is coming to opposition for yourself again in this as well. You've kind of passed that already, but it's going to transit over it again this year. And we can see the nodes is with the Grand Cross. We see the Jupiter in Sagittarius applying to the North Node in this moment, and square to. So it's kind of interesting how the Jupiter and transiting your Neptune are operating on her Grand Cross in this moment. So it's kind of like highlighting her intuition, her knowledge that she has brought to herself in her own healing journey to bring it on for others here. Because not only is she turning it on for her mother, she's turning it on to other people as well in her community. We see that Mars is opposite the Pluto as well from the 10th to the 4th. Mars at that moment was in Aries, and Pluto, the natal Pluto in Libra, so that's cardinal energy. And, you know, a bit challenged to work through that from your mom's complications with the minor stroke. Yeah. And we can see that that's also square the transiting. We have a transiting Mercury square transiting Mars. Then so that transiting Mercury is square. So it kind of acts like a T-square a bit to the Pluto in the 4th. So the transformation with the relationship with the mother. Of course, mother could sit in either 10th house or 4th house because of the parental axis. It kind of carry both. I think you'd mentioned in our dialogue, you know, the conversations with your father or something, that it was changing for him as well, like just the changing dynamics, but I can't recall the details. Do you want to add anything there or no?
No, I think that's cool. I think that's what he's, yeah, I can't add anything more. Nothing's coming.
Yep. Okay. I think that is the last one. Let me just double check here. Yep. So Phoebe, thank you so much. That is the last one for you. I think I just want to just recap before I jump into Sarah's charts, that I hope that in this example, through the sharing of Phoebe's experiences, you can see kind of like at first when things activated her grand cross, the mutable grand cross in her chart and the planets that were significant in her nodal axes, kind of was like she was all kind of scattered and mutable all over the place and free. She's still free, very free in how she expresses herself, but now there's more purpose from what she's come to in her understanding, in her own healing journey, what she wants to bring to others, and just the love in her heart. She's got this beautiful Leo expression, and it comes from the heart. So I see kind of that she's going to be a teacher in her community for what she's brought to herself. So, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Sounds good.
Thank you so much. All right, Sarrah.
Switch off.
Hi, Sarrah. You can unmute yourself so we're talking. Can you unmute? There you go. So this is your chart. So we're going to be talking about your chart and the T-square. And so we've got rising sign is Scorpio. And Scorpio, we have a 12th house Neptune is the focal point planet for your T-square. And we're going to be exploring what happens when planets transit over this spot, but also when they transit over either the moon or the Mercury, but mainly over the T-square point because it's kind of the interrupter into this thing. So rising sign 28 degrees Scorpio, and the ruler Pluto is in the 9th house in Virgo. I also look at Mars from the traditional, and it's in the 6th in Taurus. And then also the opposition of the T-square happening is Mercury at 28 degrees, 44 minutes of Cancer, and the moon, which rules that Mercury, at 2 degrees of Aquarius, 54 minutes. So the North Node is in Virgo, ruled by Mercury, so that Mercury is important for her North Node unfolding. And then the South Node in Pisces is ruled by the Neptune, which is a focal point. So you can see how her nodal axis is a part of the T-square rulerships by planets. Okay, so they're going to be very significant here. All right. So we're going to jump into a little bit of background. Let's see here. Bear with me here. I'm going to change my notes. Okay, I'm going to cover, first going to jump in around November 29th, 2012. And then this is a transiting Saturn scenario, and this is the first time the transiting Saturn comes to the, maybe not the first time, because your Saturn is in Capricorn, so you had another time in Saturn. But this was 2012, and transiting Saturn is now conjunct the Neptune, natal Neptune in Scorpio at 6 degrees, and activating the T-square focal planet. And at that moment, also, the nodes are just coming over her ascendant descendant line at 26 Taurus and South Node, and 26 Scorpio on the North Node by her ascendant. So Saturn is a key planet, and we register that Saturn is in the second house. So it's about how she builds over time through maturity what she values. And it has influence in her money, her income, and how she works with that. In this moment, we can see that Mars and Pluto are applying to her Saturn, her natal Saturn, from 8 degrees and 9 degrees of Capricorn. So there's an influence from the power, and also how engaged with the Mars it is with the Capricorn. Also, we can see the natal Mars is actually trine in Earth sign to her natal Saturn, and in this transiting Pluto and Mars. Okay, so at this time, Sarah, can you give us some insights into what is happening in your life around this first transit of Saturn to Scorpio in 2012?
Back from a trip. I was on a trip to Bali.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been in Bali partially for work, sort of scouting out people who could make my jewelry, that I'm a jeweler, make jewelry for me. So I was there partially for work and then partially for play.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to go into more of the...
So we have...
That's that day.
That's the day. So you just returned that day from Bali.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, some of these, like Saturn takes a long time over a planet in terms of the transit. So it's kind of like that is like a point where it's, just minutes past. So while you're in Bali, maybe even when you're on the plane, you're having that exact, right? So there's a couple of things that I want to kind of add into the conversation here. Is it's Saturn, so the fact that you're there in Bali for jewelry making and meeting with potential merchants or manufacturers who could design, build your jewelry or create your jewelry and produce it for you. You're making relationship contacts, and so this to me is like influencing income potential. So it's kind of talking back to the second house like that. At the same moment, you are in reflection of a relationship, correct? When you're coming back. So
Yeah.
This is, I think, a key moment in deciding about this relationship, because I think when you get back is when it kind of turns on, even though you've kind of half turned it off. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was a hard relationship to turn off. It took years to completely turn off.
Yeah.
He's a Scorpio. So, so yeah, I was kind of officially broken up with him, but I was still talking to him.
Yeah.
Whatever. And then when I got back, yeah, that was when I got back, and it was the January after that we ended up actually moving in together. But I was still not feeling good about the relationship, and I think he was talking to me like we were just friends at that point, and telling me that he told me he wanted to have babies with other women at that point when I got back from Bali. I remember thinking, okay, like he had this plan to have multiple babies with the, so I said, well, okay, well, that's not happening with me. And it was a very strange thing to hear, you know, a person saying, I want to have babies with women, different women. So, yeah, so that was, I was still in the thick of it. I had met him in 2010, and it didn't actually officially end until, I'm not even sure. It wasn't clear cut. Maybe a year ago, actually, is the last time I saw him. But it really ended in 2014. So.
Yeah, there was these lingering moments that kind of reunited you, and we'll get into that here later. But this is a moment that I would look at as you come back from Bali. You had told me that you had invited him to Bali, but it didn't work out and he did not go. So, and then he was giving you these red flags of, I'm going to have a baby mama, or he wants babies and other women and all of that coming in. So there's some red flags, and yet at the same time, you're back now. It's like this point, like you've come back, jewelry, you're trying to get it to be more fruitful for you and financially fruitful for you. So you're trying to get that thing going more. And he's in the picture. He's kind of comes in, and Scorpio wants to merge and deeply entangle, and for the transformation, right? I think that's part of the underworld journey, that is inviting that transformation. So here you are as it heads into the new year. You guys are reconnecting. You're getting back together and making even more commitment together by moving in together. So I think this is a real important moment to kind of look at the Scorpio Saturn on Neptune in Scorpio. And so the Neptune as the T in the 12th house is probably more likely igniting, or activating is a better word, some illusion that you can't see yet. It's starting, you know, it's kind of like this change point, this moment. You could have taken another route, but this relationship is kind of coming back in to help you understand something about yourself. So
exactly.
Next year, we're going to look at the next time Saturn hits this spot in May of 2013. So this is the next moment, and in this moment it's retrograde, right? So it's back. And you're together, and you're starting a funeral business service thing. Can you kind of share what that is?
That was his vocation. He had gone to mortuary school, and so I kind of pushed him to do it, but he wasn't doing anything good when I met him. And so I said, you know, you got to do something. You're put on this earth to do something. So I ended up getting sucked into it. You know, I was trying to do my jewelry business this whole time, but he sucks your energy. And so I ended up being a partner in this service. It was, we had an office, and we would arrange funerals and cremations and have full-on services in the church with open caskets and the whole thing, which was like completely new to me. But I financed it. I financed everything with him. And so we kind of I remember we had an opening party in June, like maybe, well, this was the 24th, like a week or two after this date. So it was, we opened the business.
So after this date, just like a little while.
Yeah.
So
just like a week or two after. It was early June, so we had the official opening of this service.
So what's interesting about this business, it's not just that the Saturn in that moment is on the 12th house T-square focal planet, Neptune, but Saturn in the business of death, you know, you're making, it's like it's a business proposition as well. It's so interesting. I was like, you know, Saturn and Capricorn, second house in business and death, you know, and how that works. I don't, and sometimes in death situations as well, it's insurance stuff is coming into that picture, because sometimes people have bought insurance for their death detail, right? And
Yeah.
and you look at your 8th house, which is Cancer, and you have all those planets in Cancer, like the Sun and Venus and Mercury there, and so it makes sense that you're doing business. And the Moon is in the 2nd house of income, and you know, and then it's ruling the 8th. So there's kind of an interesting tie of this business through this relationship, and yet it kind of lights up your T-square from the Saturn, and from, you know, the business itself with death, but your emotions are also kind of in the mix, because you're still trying to register this individual as a partner, made him into a business partner, so you've kind of added to the equation, not just a romantic partner, even though that's been complicated because of the Scorpio, and how that's in the mix. So we see that also the South Node has come to your Mars in Taurus, which is interesting, because I think this is the service aspect. At the same time, I think there's the money. Taurus is also money. And to the business partner, I kind of see as a 6th house kind of thing, and the transiting Mars is approaching, you know, the descendant line, and so it's money to the partner. It's kind of going out. Your money is going out, and it kind of reflects in this chart. But you're making an investment, thinking it's going to make sense, and it's something he, you know, skilled himself to do, and yet there's some, from a romantic partner, probably not good, maybe from a business partner potential, but you're the one making the money investment. So you just, it's how is that going to turn out? And you don't know, of course, when you first start. Everyone starts things with good intentions. It's being successful. At the same time, if you notice, Jupiter in Gemini is approaching an opposition to your own Jupiter in Sag. It's only like 4 degrees away, so within a short period of time it would have been truly in an opposition to itself in transit, and of course approaching the 8th house, you know. So this is like a lot going on with the partner, because it's sitting in the partner's, you know, the partner's 7th house, but it's kind of turning on the business piece too, because Jupiter is ruled, that Jupiter in transit in the Gemini is ruled by the Mercury that's in your T-square, you know, from the opposition between the Mercury and the Moon. So, and it's kind of approaching that, so it's kind of activating it in that way through the partner. I think we covered everything on that one. I've got an arrow at the bottom of the chart. I'm trying to remember which one it is. The 5, I think it's for the for the Neptune approaching the nadir of the chart. I wanted to highlight that the Neptune is approaching the 11th degree. It's at 5 degrees Pisces in this moment, but it's applying towards the nadir, which speaks of some release coming up. Also, 2nd house, the transiting Pluto is applying to the Saturn, natal Saturn. So there's like that kind of transformation of what you're valuing. So everything's going through a significant transformation under the value. And through this relationship, it was key in some ways to understanding yourself at a very, very deep level. and in some of the unconscious pieces of yourself that you, through the relationship, becoming aware of and recognizing as well, and what you attracted and accepted too. So we're going to go to the next one. This is August 22nd, 2013, and this is the last hit on that transit, I think, of Saturn in Scorpio coming to the focal planet of the T-square, Neptune. And in the moment that I just did this at 12 noon, the ascendant is right there again, showing kind of this intensification of the Saturn conjunct that Neptune. And so this is what, about 2 months later or so from the last one. No, it's a couple months. It's a couple more. It's about 3 or 4 months.
3 months.
Yeah. So we can see that the moon is in Pisces in the 4th house and in transit. Of course, the moon moves very quickly, but Chiron is right there, and that's coming across your south node at 17 degrees Pisces. So the Neptune is picking up, because it's the ruler of that Pisces of the 4th house. This is going to influence your home environment, you know, what you have as a home. So this is 2013. And also at the moment, the south node is just past your natal Mars at 14 Taurus on the other side of the chart. There could be more money being invested in the business at this point, but this is August. I can't remember what was the detail for August. Do you remember that one? August of 2000?
I didn't remember much specifically, except that his son moved in with us. His son, who was I think he was around 11 or 12 or 13 or something like that.
A teenager, basically, young teenager.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned your children were also, you had 2 children at home at the time, yeah? And so this is kind of...
I had my son at home.
Oh, okay.
And maybe my daughter. You know what? I don't remember 2013. I think she was in college, but I think she was home for the summer.
Okay. So at the end of the summer, she may have.
They were staying half and half with me and their father.
Okay.
And then he brought in this one child, and he had another kid who lived nearby who would come over. They were all kind of teenagers, or this one was the youngest one, the one who came to move in. He must have been 14. So it was this. He came to live with us permanently, and so that was, something to do with the home. He was a problem, actually, that kid. He and I had problems with each other.
And that may be highlighted by the couple of things. You have Uranus transiting your 5th house, so that would be like an unexpected thing with the children coming into your life. And even unexpected for your own children to kind of register this new child as well. And the moment that this is going on, you also have Mars is applying to the T-square, but from to the Mercury. It's only about 2 degrees away from the Mercury, so it's getting closer to really becoming more active. I mean, it's still within orb right now. Of course, Saturn is still, this is the final hit of Saturn, and so this is like another level of engagement in this relationship, and you can't see all of the hidden things yet, but they're starting to add up at this point. Jupiter in Cancer is in the 8th, and it's opposite the Saturn just by 2 degrees and applying to it, so there's maybe a tension between what you value and maybe the responsibility you have towards just making money for the family here because of your, you're probably taking on more burden at this point, and what's going into the business. So there's kind of this kind of both things going on. So it's activating the T-square from that perspective as well. So it's just kind of building the story, yeah, but you can't quite see everything yet, yeah. So even though we had red flags. So going further.
Oh, the red flags were there from the I agree.
Yeah. Going to the next one. Now there's some things that from 13, 14, 15, there's some other movements and things, but I want to kind of jump to the next big point. And that is November 8th of 2017. So you can kind of lead up to the story if you want to bring in some things of 14 where you kind of the relationship is kind of ending, but the business kind of keeps you kind of coming back around January every year for some reason. That's a pattern. And kind of take it from there and give us like a little bit that flows into this, because I think you also had mentioned some things about your finances that I think landed in 2015, and so you can bring that in a sentence just for sake of time here.
Yeah, I went bankrupt. So, I had a lot of money, and I just was not responsible. I was spending more than I was bringing in. So I ended up going bankrupt 2015. And the relationship had ended in 2014. But yeah, he kept kind of pulling me back in with this, he'd get another cremation or something, and I'd have to work on it with him type thing, and then we'd kind of be back in connection, and then it would disappear. So anyway, so 2015 went bankrupt, and then I had to just hustle for work, because the jewelry business I could not get it back going. Tried, I just couldn't in that year, and I kind of just gave up on it and was Ubering and Airbnb at my house. But meanwhile, it was getting harder and harder to rent in the Bay Area, and I didn't look too good on paper at that point. So I had to move. I got pushed out by one landlord in 2014, and then 2 years later by another one, the fall of 2016.
Like raising their prices for rent, or they're turning them into Airbnb because they're too lucrative, right?
Right. Well, yeah, the second one, he saw how well I was doing at the Airbnb. I was doing it with his permission, and then he had all these properties, and he was like, well, and he started just kicking people out of these houses to Airbnb. And he had bought the house for his daughter, so he was legally able to get me out without paying. So that was just, the Bay Area was insane, trying to either buying or renting. So I had to just leave. I had my dog, and ended up moving down to the desert, where my friends who had also been kicked out of our Oakland apartment in 2014, they ended up down there, and they said, come down here. We have room in our house. You can look for a job. And I did that in January 2017. And that whole year, 2017, I lasted there about 6 weeks, and I couldn't find a job, so I moved to LA so I could Uber and Lyft. And it was just I moved several times. I moved again in October or November of 2017. And I was looking for a job, and was having a really hard time finding one because I had no experience. And anyway, that takes us up to November 8th. So then in November 1st, I couldn't afford, my dog died that summer, so I didn't have to have a house with a yard anymore, and I couldn't afford the house. So I moved in with a friend for about 6 weeks, and then she couldn't have me anymore, so I moved out in mid-December, and then for about a month I was homeless. I was staying at Airbnbs and Ubering and just living like that until I got the job that I have right now.
So I want to just go over the chart real quickly. We're running out of time, really.
Yeah. Yes.
So basically, there's a couple of things that are important. Note that the planet, the focal planet, has come to the nadir of your chart. So Neptune is basically applying very strong to her fourth house cusp, and it's in Pisces, so there's this fluidity to it, so nothing seems to be solid for her in that moment. But Jupiter is taking it deeper. So Jupiter is the transiting planet in Scorpio on the T-square through that natal Neptune, making it bigger. And additionally, we can see that Saturn in Sagittarius by transit is coming to the Jupiter. So there's this interplay between the Jupiter and Saturn, kind of restricting her ability to maybe land on something that's solid, and giving her limits that otherwise may not have been there, you know. And so this is kind of a significant moment in transformation for her, really registering kind of the before relationships and that come into this moment, right? I'm going to jump through this next one. This one is, I'll go ahead and discuss this. This was kind of in the summer before that moment, or no, this is the next year, because that's 17, this is 18. You landed a job in January-ish of 2018, the job you have now. But in the summertime, because of all the fallout from the bankruptcy and everything, and housing, and just the challenge of landing a decent paying job, and the California market, you know, your car was no longer your car, and don't have to pay the loan anymore, no debt for it, but you're now in a situation without a car in LA. So we can see some additional insights. The focal planet Neptune is now on the south node in the fourth house, and so there's kind of a loss there of property, and but also this transiting node and the moon and Mars are in the early degrees of Aquarius, coming just past your moon, and so that's home related, right? And from what the moon symbolizes for us, from that identity piece for us. We also have the sun is in Leo in that moment and opposite your moon, and transiting Venus is in Virgo opposite the transiting Uranus. So there's just this real big release of pull there, and the Venus is on the north node, so it's kind of like even though it's kind of a release for her, and because of the debt that the car had on her as well, so it's kind of a release, but at the same time she has to figure out the transportation, but there is a release there. So I'm going to quickly go through to finish up here. April 23rd 2018, this is when the partner, he had come into some money, and a debt is owed to Sarrah because she invested so much money. It was agreed about $100,000 was owed to her, and yet at the time he basically spent it in inappropriate ways, I guess I would label it that, I guess, but only
Wasn't on me.
Huh?
Not on me.
Yeah, but not paying his debt, and so he only did about $4,000 back, when it was approximately about $100,000 in investment to his business and so forth, but he never took care of it. But then along comes the government and seized it in some way, because, well, he spent a lot of money with the baby mama, and then but he was then it was seized or blocked or some way because he had other debts to other mothers, and so there's kind of like a layered thing there going on mid or spring of 2018. I'm not going to talk too much on that one, okay? I just want to kind of share that, and there's detail. I'm running out of time.
Yeah, I actually have to get to my job.
Yeah, let me just see what we got here. So let me just, in August of 2018, there's a family issue that brings in the Jupiter, but that's more the south node on the moon. And that's basically a family issue, communication with the sister. It's not going well. And that is very active for the family and Sarah as well. And then finally, there was a total lunar eclipse in Leo Aquarius at 0 degrees 51 minutes. I kind of look at this as at the beginning of this year, having kind of with the job security, she's been there a year in her new job, but having the time to reflect on everything that's kind of come in the last, say, 7 years or so, 8 years, going into 9 years now, and kind of what's next. That's what's on. There's been a deep transformation for Sarah, understanding the Scorpio ascendant, but also the underworld journey of herself. And as part of her Saturn returning Capricorn, how I'm going to rebuild. These are the things up for Sarah right now. Anything else you want to add, Sarah, as we exit?
No, well, to be continued, I guess. I don't know what the future is, but yeah, definitely you capped that nicely.
Yes. Well, if anyone wants to ask me questions in email, you're welcome to. You can reach me at sarah@onesagesview.com. We're out of time, and I wanted to thank everybody for attending. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.